Hello to all you Patriots out there in podcast land, and welcome to episode 320 of Canadian Patriot Podcast, the #1 live book and rifle club podcast in Canada. We're recording on October 25th, 2021. My name is Andrew. Joining me tonight for book club, we have Gavin, Dave, and Pierre.
We'd love to hear your feedback about the show. So please visit CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. So that's feedback or emails at feedback@CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. Feel free to send us some more book suggestions. Some of them have been pretty good. The ones that are not good, we just ignore.
We need your help. To support the Canadian Patriot Podcast, visit patreon.com/CPP and become a Patreon. You can get a better quality version of the show for just $1 per episode. Show you're not a communist and buy a CPP t-shirt for just $24.99 plus shipping and theft. Visit CanadianPatriotPodcast.com homepage and follow the link on the right.
This brings us to my favorite segment. It's called What Are We Drinking? It's where I ask my co-conspirators what they're drinking. Let's go clockwise. We'll start with Pierre. Pierre, what are you drinking?
Got a glass of 40 Creek and then a pack of cold shots after the 40 Creek. I've got some hard decisions to make in the next week, so I figured tonight's the night.
That's a solid plan. Gavin, what are you drinking?
The huge Signal Hill Diet Pepsi.
Dave?
I went for a little shopping over the weekend, so I just started grabbing some random stuff at the Lickbo. This one is called Metalhead. It's got a cool picture on it. I grabbed it equally for the picture and also because of the fact that it's a pale ale. So we'll see if it's any good.
Right on.
Well, let's see. We'll take a sip, Dave, right now, live. Let's do this.
It's pale ale. It'll be fine.
It's a little strong, but I think I can do it.
Does it say how many IBU it is? Okay, I now I need to be like Spurgy about beer.
Oh, that's why it's strong. Can you see that? 8.5%.
No.
Okay, so it literally is just a lot of alcohol. It's not like an overwhelming flavor.
It's got a bit of a hint of citrus, actually. Not now that you mention it, but I don't know if that's just me or if that's all the alcohol. Hard to say.
But it doesn't taste like a skunk farted in your mouth.
Oh, it does say hoppy tropical royalty. So maybe yeah.
Bro, this says it's a double IPA.
Oh, yes, double India Pale Ale. What's the double mean? I don't even know what that means. I'm not a
8.5%, bud.
Yeah.
All right then.
It's stronger. Yeah.
There's more. Yes.
I mean, the can art is pretty fantastic, and the name is pretty fantastic, but I wish
That's all you've got going for you.
It is Monday night. Let's get her started. Starting the week off right.
Fair enough. I've got 15-year-old Scotch, courtesy of Chris. I now can't remember what brand of Scotch it is, which is deeply embarrassing because I just poured it.
I believe it was a Glenlivet, if it's the bottle that you posted
Yes.
a photo of.
Thank you. Yes, oh, that's right. I did take a picture of it. Too bad I didn't think of that. Yes, 15-year-old Glenlivet.
Yes.
It's
Nice.
very, very, very good.
The French Oak Reserve, to be specific.
Well, it's best to be specific because if we're nothing if not pedantic,
Metric.
Specific or specific?
Yes.
like the ocean.
Yes.
There we go. Chris is there in the YouTube. Thank you, Chris, for the tasty alcohol.
Yes.
God, that's so good.
No,
It is good. I buy that. I buy that bottle from time to time to have around the house. Yeah, it's a nice treat.
So good. And I'll upset Marty by drinking it, which is also funny. I almost started the book. That's not true. We got to do housekeeping. Drinking is out of the way. Patriot Challenge. 5 things every day to be a better person. Exercise for 45 minutes, practice a skill for 10 minutes, read a book for 15 minutes, drink 2 liters of water, and complete a task that will improve your life. And if you're on social media, you can grab the template off the website and share it with your friends and or enemies and show people what you're doing to be a better person.
Yes.
Section 74 challenges are ongoing. All gun laws are an infringement, and all legal challenges cost money. Go throw them a shekel.
Challenge.
And I guess we'll get this out of the month, or I guess get this out of the way for next month. Next month's book, before I forget, Julius Evola's A Handbook for Right-Wing Youth, which I have gotten just as far this week as I had last week, which is to say I'm still reading the first essay for the 11th time.
It could be a little dense at times.
Yeah, yes, don't
well,
try
if it doesn't
and start
pick
the
up
book.
soon.
Yeah, it's a hard read. I started reading it the other night. I was like, I'm a little tired. I was like, I want to get ahead of start on it and started reading it. And after rereading it like 6 times, I was like, yeah, fuck this. Don't do this tired. You need to be a little more awake for it, I found. But we'll see.
Well, that'll be next month. This month, the reason that we are gathered here is to talk about a man who, much like some of our other military authors that we read, I wonder how he got dressed in the morning with his enormous balls.
Yeah.
Is the American version of Daryl Watt? Just
I
about?
mean, maybe not quite.
Maybe not in the
I
same
mean,
pantheon, but you know. Up there.
I mean, I don't know if they'd have the same size balls, but his would be damn close in size. They like slightly smaller. Probably because like at some point in his career he did spend some time in cold weather, unlike Daryl Watt, who was just in the jungles of Africa.
Yeah, drinking gas, whatever.
so
But I
this month's
understand
book-
why a lot of military have short shorts now. So
Right.
that people with gigantic
Everything that
balls
breathes.
fit in shorts.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right. It's all about that airflow. So the October book we're doing, Inside Delta Force, Command Master Sergeant Eric Haney. You guys have anything opening shots before I
Well, it's one of the
start
few
reading
books-
drunkenly?
It's one of the few books I've read many times because I like it that much. Just throwing that out there.
Well,
I
if you
enjoy
have
this
particular
read.
passages that you would like to read that you've got highlighted and have little hearts drawn into.
I mean, it's right here. It's pretty weathered, as you can see. This is the book. The back is pretty worn out. I'll let you begin though.
Well, books are written in a certain way, and best to begin at the beginning, so starting with the introduction. I am a nomad, son of an ancient line of nomads. The larger part of my family line is made up of the Scots-Irish, a people descended from that peculiar mix of the Celts of the northern British Isles and the invading Danes and Norsemen. The result was a landless, illiterate, anarchic, and warlike people who were always difficult, if not downright impossible, to govern. They were a race the British Crown rightfully viewed as dangerous rebels and consequently exiled to the New World by the tens of thousands. On arrival in the American colonies, these people fled as far as possible from government control, many of them crossing the Blue Ridge Mountains and migrating from there throughout what would eventually be the highlands of the southern United States. They were the original backwoodsmen of American history. In their new home, these renegade peoples tended to travel together in interrelated clans that also married and bred quite readily with the Cherokee and Creek Indians of the region. Both sides of my family were landless sharecroppers and mountain people as far back as I can determine. There is no written record of ancestry, for my parents were the first of our people to read and write and to own a little property. Inherited wealth may be something easily squandered, but inherited poverty is a legacy almost impossible to lose. What did I receive from this lineage? Things I consider to be very valuable. A good raw intellect and a good tough body. A sense of independence and a realization that wherever I am is my home. A sense of humor, a sense of personal honor that results in touching commonness to our people. We are easily offended and prone to violence when offended. When the only thing that is your own sense of honor, when the only thing that you own is your own sense of honor, you tend to protect it at all costs. I inherited a sense of wanderlust and a curiosity about the world. I inherited a warlike attitude. We have always been good soldierly material if properly disciplined and broken in. I inherited a sense of spirituality rather than religion that has served me well, especially in trying times. I am self-confident and resilient. My psyche is self-cleansing. I love life. I grew up in the mountains of North Georgia during the 50s and 60s. It was part of the third world, and some say it still is. Electricity came to our home when I was a young boy. Indoor plumbing followed some years later. Though I have some fair native intelligence, I never received any direction in school and was often an indifferent student, but I love to read and will consume all of my textbooks at the start of the year and then coast after that. I preferred roaming the mountains, hunting, fishing, and exploring. I had become the first in my family to graduate high school, and for us that was considered a pretty good achievement, as our expectations weren't very high. It isn't that my parents were against education. It's that neither of them had gone further than elementary school, and they just didn't have the ability to understand, to help. Though we may not have been scholars, we did know how to go into the military. I had grown up listening to the war stories and tales of my family and friends, and I was determined to join up as soon as I was able. I enlisted in the Army in spring of 1970 while still in high school, with a reporting date immediately after graduation. I fell in love with the Army as soon as I met her. I became a professional soldier, and that is what I will be until I die. The military is a profession that brands itself to the soul and causes you to forever view the world and all human endeavor through its unique set of mental filters. The more profound and intense the experience, the hotter the brand and the deeper it is plunged into you. I serve to the core of my being. For 20 years I served America in the most demanding and dangerous units in the United States Army. As a combat infantryman, as a ranger, and ultimately as a founding member and 8-year veteran of America's super secret counterterrorism arm, Delta Force. Close, brutal combat puts a callous layer on each individual who undergoes the experience. With some men, their souls become trapped inside those accrued layers. They stay tightly bound up within themselves, unable or unwilling to reach outside of that hard protective shell. For others, the effect is just the opposite. That coating becomes like a looking glass, highlighting and magnifying the things that are really important in life. Every sensation becomes precious and delicious. Even the painful ones. Sometimes, especially the painful ones. I feel that's what my experiences have done for me. I hate the destructiveness and waste of warfare, but I love the sensation of combat. I love the sensation of it. In combat, mankind is seen in absolutes, at his very best or his very worst. There are no in-betweens. No one has a place to hide. War has also taught me that each one of us contains every ingredient of the human recipe. By varying measure, we are all cowards and brave men, thieves and honest men, selfish and selfless men, malingerers and champions, weasels and lions. The only question is how much of each attribute we allow or force to dominate our being. In combat, there are no winners. The victors just happen to lose less than the vanquished. One side may impose its will on the other, but there is nothing noble or virtuous about this process. People are killed and maimed, homes and communities are destroyed, lives are shattered, families are broken apart and scattered to the wind, and just a few years later, we can barely remember why. It's a
Hell of an intro.
Yes.
dude's a solid writer for being a grunt. I will grant him that. Like, that is
Yes.
very well written.
To be fair, he was definitely destined to be more than a grunt. I mean, Delta Force just doesn't let any grunt join.
No, but I mean, like, this is a guy who joins the Army in 1970 with a high school education, and I mean, like, does obviously very well for himself in military service, but like, the dude can write.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Like one of the first in his family to get his education, like even high school education, right? Like, very well written, very smart man, which you learn as the book goes on that, you know, he does need to have a little bit of a head on his shoulders to get out of stuff and figure stuff out. And yeah,
Definitely.
would like to have a beer.
I mean,
Yeah.
clearly smarter than the average bear if he's reading his entire textbook for a semester and then coasting. That's above average intelligence in my
he
mind.
spells out pretty clearly, where his family and his background came from, which is nothing, essentially. Like, no silver spoon in the mouth kind of a thing from youth. Just like a regular dude that didn't grow up with a whole lot of anything and somehow managed to succeed and become quite intelligent, able to write and perform well in a physically demanding, role as an infantry, and then a ranger, and then, Delta. I mean,
well, I guess maybe we should touch on a little bit of that military parlance for people that are not super up on U.S. Army things. I think infantryman is a pretty self-explanatory thing, right? Infantry guys are the riflemen that are doing the combat, closing with and destroying the enemy, right? Like that's pretty straightforward. In the U.S. military, there's a couple of different things with Rangers. There's Ranger Qualified and there's Ranger Regiment. So Ranger Qualified people go to a school to get qualified to be more experienced, more knowledgeable infantry people, whereas Ranger Battalion is closer to the special operations side of things, right? They do more special tasks. They used to be tasked primarily with airfield seizure was sort of their big thing, right? But then you have like the whole John Wayne Green Beret stuff since then.
Yeah, but yeah, like anyone can really go to Ranger school and get that little Ranger tab, but that doesn't make you a Ranger, which is a different thing.
And then Delta, such as it is there, well, the book talks about his experience with the founding of Delta, but Delta is the premier American counterterrorism unit. They're some of the best, not just for the Army. The Delta, at least now, allegedly, according to other people that have written books about Delta, draws from all of the services. Although it does belong to, I think they fall under the Joint Special Operations Command now.
Yeah, I think
there
was a restructuring a few years ago. I think that was in 2016 they restructured.
Yeah, so that's kind of when like all of the sort of elite groups like them, the SEALs, and stuff like that, all kind of got put under the command of JSOC.
To one point, they seem to have, you kind of mentioned it briefly, but they originally, the big problem they were having that they originally wanted to be the best at and be able to counter was specifically terrorism and hijackings on planes.
Well, which like through the the 70s and 80s or whatever, like that was very prevalent. That happened a lot.
Exactly. So they wanted to they wanted to be the best at that. That was, where they seemed to have found the biggest need to be the best at, and it had never been done before. So, SAS had done it a bit. And I think, what was it, Germany? Some GSG guys did it, but failed, like miserably. Like a bunch of people got shot when they tried to board the plane. I can't remember if it was Germany or something else.
It was the Germans or the French? It was GSG or GIGN.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was, the whole thing was so new. Like the tactics weren't really there. The training wasn't really there because nobody really had a way to deal with this problem that kind of all of a sudden kind of came out of nowhere and then was happening all the time. And yeah, I mean, the Brits used the SAS to deal with some stuff like that, even though they weren't really designed for that.
No,
but I guess they had success when they stormed the prison and took control of that. So then they started using them for more and more stuff like that.
Well, that's sort of the thing, is like, this is in through the 70s and 80s. This is like the beginning of this type of asymmetrical special warfare counterterrorism type role. It didn't really, like, prior to that, I mean, like, not that the Brits, for example, with the SAS, haven't been dealing with terrorism in Ireland for hundreds of years. Also, stop oppressing my people, but like, that's beside the point.
Potato.
The type of counterterrorism that they started to get into after Vietnam was its whole own different animal, right? Nobody really had experience, especially when you get to things like hijacking airliners. That's not right. Like commercial aviation was not
And that was.
I mean, not to say it
commercial
hadn't
aviation was
taken off, but like,
Yeah, it was getting
Boo.
more accepted, more.
well, getting to be a big enough thing and getting to be that it was a targetable thing. Like, because
Yeah.
again, like the
They
Bush
didn't have all the
War.
metal detectors and the 9/11 stuff we
Well,
have
but
now,
like it
right?
wasn't such a thing that like if you disrupted it that it really caused any grief for anybody. But then once it reached that sort of critical acceptance and became a way of important people traveling around and sending important documents via airmail and all of that, then all of a sudden hijacking of a plane or even shutting down an airport becomes a bigger disruption, which means that you get more clout, right?
You get more attention. Right? It
Yeah.
creates a bigger impact, more mass panic.
Yeah.
And you start getting in, I mean, like we're getting into the tail end of the Cold War too. Terrorism in Western countries gets to be a more common occurrence as the Soviet Union disintegrates.
Well, you've got
So-
more and more, weapons of, military grade that found their way into the civilian market, or, fractions of military units that are disenfranchised now and have formed their own thing and trying to get some money and, selling their services or just doing their own thing from all these different countries that got all this training and managed to borrow some equipment.
Well, let's, I'm going to go in. I got a couple of things back to back here in the book that I want to talk about because we touched a little bit on the U.S. military.
Do you want me to read a section?
Sure. If you want to queue up on page 30, there's a paragraph midway down talking about their road march.
Starting, what words does the paragraph start with normally? For my rucksack.
My rucksack.
Okay. Just let me know when you want me to finish or when you want me to stop. Sorry.
Sure. I've got one thing to do before that.
Okay.
Sergeant majors are the walking, breathing embodiment of everything that's right in the U.S. Army. This guy looked like Joe Shit the Ragman. His shirt was wide open. He wore no t-shirt. His dog tags were gold-plated. His hat was tipped up into the back of his head, and he wore a huge, elaborately curled and wax-handlebar mustache. There was trickery of some kind here. The only thing I expected on this trip was the unexpected. So if this was a game, I figured I'd play along and see what happened. I stepped 3 paces in front of the man, slammed to a halt, and from the rigid position of parade rest barked, "Sergeant Major, I was told to see you and draw some equipment." He eyed me for a second or so, and the wrinkles of his grin crawled from beneath his mustache and settled around his eyes. "Goddamn, Ranger, relax a little bit, will you? This ain't no promotion board. You keep that shit up, you're gonna wear me out." His voice was the rumbling rich with a tinge of the hills deep within. It was a force of habit. In the Rangers, when you addressed a more senior NCO, you stood at parade rest. I relaxed slightly in the position of at ease. "That's a little better," he said. His grin widened. He didn't seem to be making fun of me, just surprised at being addressed in such a formal manner. Go over to the supply shack and get yourself a bag of junk and sign your name on the roster at the door. Don't worry about getting it too clean when you turn it in. Everybody knows my standards ain't very high." Christ almighty, this was shaping up to be a strange place. I hustled down to the supply shack, signed for the bag of equipment, and talked to the guy on duty while I checked the contents of the bag against the equipment list. "Is that guy up there really a sergeant major?" I don't know how to actually pronounce this guy's name. Is it Shumate?
Shoemate? I think I
Shoemate?
said
Yeah.
shoemate. Yeah. It's like Schumacher, shoemate.
Yeah, Shumate.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
what I
he
think.
really is. He's the sergeant major in charge of selection. Well, he's certainly different from any sergeant major I've ever met before. He's different from any human being you've ever met before. And it goes on to talk about Shoemate, whose name I've not heard said, so I apologize for not having looked that up to know how to pronounce it. This guy, Special Forces, badass, in mostly Korea. But yeah, seen it all, done it all, and ran Delta selection for the first time out.
That
branch
description
did he
of
come
him
from?
though, with like the fucking blinged out dog tags and all of that, it was just like, man, as soon as I heard that, I was like, I want to have a beer with this guy. Like,
Yeah.
This is my man. This is my jam right here. What service did he come from again?
He was
SEAL?
an infantryman.
yeah.
Okay. They didn't say like what special forces he was in. Was it Green Berets or?
I think he was. Sorry, yes, I think he was a Green Beret. I think that is what they mean by special forces.
Yeah, there was only a couple in Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that
So
guy.
I mean, Shoemate shows up a lot throughout selection and around Delta after they get through selection, but like the selection process is fascinating and weird, and it's like just full of
Yeah.
fuck games.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's unlike anything I've ever read for any other branch of service. It's
Well, and like, and they just made it up.
yeah.
Yeah. It
But
almost like they made it up as they were going along entirely. Like they didn't know what they were doing tomorrow until they woke up in the morning.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
It's
Like,
like if we don't know, they won't know. But I mean,
Yeah,
it
no,
definitely routed out all non-hackers eventually, right? Like there
Yeah.
was no fucking
Well,
around.
and like physically and mentally demanding training, selection,
Yeah.
testing.
Test. That was good. Well, either testing or.
I don't know, I guess we'll get into it after I read the next part.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. If you want to start reading, and I'll cut you off if I get bored.
Okay. Pardon me. My rucksack registered 42 pounds when I hung it on the scales just before supper. I took it back to the hooch and added what seemed about 3 pounds, then fastened 2 canteens of water to the lower sides of the ruck. I wanted to be able to get at them without taking my rucksack off, and I wanted my load to weigh just a bit more than prescribed, just in case these scales were a little off. Normally, I would also be wearing my LBE load-bearing equipment. This consists of a pistol belt and its shoulder harness, to which are attached magazine and first aid pouches, compass, strobe light, knife or bayonet, canteens, or other odds and ends. The LBE is your fighting load. It is how you carry your ammunition and the items you need to fight and survive in combat. Loaded for combat, it weighs about 40 pounds. The rucksack is then worn over top of the LBE. But the bulletin board instructions said nothing about LBA, and I intended to follow instructions to the letter. At 18:30, we boarded trucks for a trip across Fort Bragg. Some of the local guys said we were on Chicken Road, a wide sandy tank trail leading straight as an arrow through the sparse pines and scrub of oaks of the mountainous sandhills. I've never seen a more ugly place. We bumped and swayed along, shrouded within a fog bank of gritty, truck-churned dust. After about 30 minutes, we came to a stop at a crossroads where we dismounted. Sergeant Major Shoemate stood nearby, watching us with a challenging grin. All right, y'all gather around. We don't need a formation. A clusterfuck will do, he said as we grabbed our rucksacks and formed a semicircle around him. Well, our happy little band is slightly smaller than it was this morning, isn't it? Shoemate asked. What? No comments? Then let us proceed. This event is the 18-mile rucksack march. We call it that because from here to the finish point is 18 miles, and you will be carrying a rucksack while you march. Complete the march as fast as you can. Stay on this road. Don't accept rides from strangers. Don't give piggyback rides to one another. Cadre members will be posted along the way. They will be holding reed chem lights as you go past. Give them your color and number. The finish point is where this road hits the pavement of King Road. A cadre member will be there to mark your finish time. Water is available along the route. You may quit at any time. To do so, merely give your color and number to any cadre member and tell him, I voluntarily withdraw. He will ask no questions. If you wish to withdraw now, just stand fast when the others depart. No one moved or spoke. Since there are no questions, he looked at his watch. Time will start in 2 minutes. Direction of march is north. He pointed in the direction we had come. I won't fire a gun or anything. Put your rucks on and depart when I call go. And have a good one. I mumbled the last part along with him under my breath. 18 miles. I wondered how they came up with that distance. It seemed a little odd. The Ranger Battalion standard for a 20-miler was 6 hours, and that was with weapon, full combat equipment, and steel pot locked on your head. I was much lighter than that, and this would be a night march on a cool, dry evening. I would try for 4.5 hours. That would equal 4 miles an hour or a mile every 15 minutes. No, that's too fast. I can't do that without running, and I'm not going to run. 5 hours would be a good time. I was certain no one in the army had a faster standard for road marching than the Rangers. Shoemate called go, and off we went. A dozen or so guys took off running, most of them in pairs. Another wad of perhaps 30 men tore off at a furious walking pace. To each his own, I figured, and concentrated on settling into my stride and getting my rucksack situated on my back. Within a few minutes, the crowd at the starting point had spread out, and I had room to establish my pace. 18 miles is a long way.
That'll do.
Okay.
That'll do. The reason that I had selected that passage, and thank you, Dave, for reading and giving everyone a break from listening to me. The standards for road marching I thought were interesting based on all of the various podcasts we've had about our own adventures in ruck marches.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. 5 hours, 18 miles. We were doing what? We're doing about 10 miles in 4 hours.
What we do when we did like a 25K?
Yeah, 25K is
Yeah.
about 10 miles.
About 10 miles.
And what were we doing? I can't remember. What was our total time on that?
I think we were about 6 hours.
We're a little less than that.
Maybe it was 5 hours and change.
Yeah, something like that.
I'd have to go back through my my Garmin watch here to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Well, we were doing about 11-minute kilometers. So.
Yeah, we were doing 11-minute kilometers was sort of our average. So I thought that was an interesting figure that they had. And the
that's fast.
Well,
That's
the difference in
very fast.
equipment that they had as well, that they were doing, it's a 40-pound ruck.
Well, it sounded like, well, with his water and everything, I think he was at 42 before he put his water.
Well, 42 plus the
42.
odds and ends that he added,
Yeah.
plus the water.
Yeah, so I think 50 pounds was what he was probably shooting for.
Probably.
Sounds about what he was going for there. 50-pound ruck when it was all said and done. Probably 51, like he said, so that he wasn't under. Because that was another thing.
Yeah.
If you were reading earlier in the book, people were instantly dismissed from the course for having rucks that weren't making weight.
Yeah, I
Well,
like
they
this. I like the scale with the sign is only like over or the needle doesn't appear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like the lesser value is like, well, how much am I short? Doesn't matter. You're short.
You're short. Get the fuck out of my face.
Well, but not even.
Well,
It's
wasn't
just
it-
like you're excused. Go sit down over there.
Yeah, non-hackers. Get out of my sight.
It wasn't there one where one guy was short and they said, okay, here's your option. You can carry this giant boulder.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Under
that
chest
rock
rock
looks like
set.
it weighs about 40 pounds. You carry that if you like.
yeah,
Yeah,
you can put
carry that if
rock
you
in your
like.
backpack or quit.
No, I don't even think they gave him an option to put it in the backpack. I think he had to like
I
carry
think
it.
he had to carry it.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, he had to carry it. It wasn't an option to put it in the back. It was like, no, you have to carry the rock. And I think that was the first checkpoint of this ruck march, wasn't it?
I don't know.
I want to say it was.
This one,
sure.
or maybe it was.
Possibly, yeah.
It was early in selection when they did that, but it was just like it was one
Yeah.
of those things that I thought was like, based on all of the conversations we've had about ruck marching and the fact that a bunch of people that participate in the panel and a bunch of people that listen to the show have participated in a bunch of these events, I thought it was kind of an interesting figure to pull out. That's what they were doing. Both the selection standard, the 40 pounds plus water, and also the Ranger standard that they were doing it with what I would call full fighting order, which they had a different name for it, but like all of their LBE plus their ruck, and they were doing a 20 miler, and they were doing it in, what do you say, 5 hours, 6 hours?
Yeah, 6 hours, I think, was the Ranger standard, and he wanted to do it in 5.
Yeah, so I thought it was interesting, so I put
Yeah, actually, it's
there,
like
but-
a page. It's a page lower, where the first checkpoint or whatever, they stopped. And one of the guys, since you're carrying nothing, the only way you can meet the weight requirement is to take this. You reached behind him and handed the guy a big, ragged piece of concrete that looked like it had come from the roadbed that had been dug up. I weighed this myself, he went on, and certified its weighs exactly 40 pounds. Now, for you to continue the march, you will sign for this item, strap it to your rucksack, and
Oh,
turn
that's right.
it
They
in
made
at
him
the finish
sign
point.
for it.
And they made then And I'm pretty sure he wasn't able to empty his rucksack either. And so he didn't have to carry it. He could have put it to his rucksack and turned it in at the finish point.
Well, it's the military. If you don't sign for it, how do they know that it's yours?
How does the queen keep track of all of her stuff if you don't
How does the
sign
queen
for
get
it?
her stuff back if you don't sign for it? Exactly.
That's her piece of torn up road.
I think that was probably my favorite part, was the fact that they made him sign for the piece of concrete.
Yeah.
It's like taking
What's the
his-
serial number on your concrete, son?
Yeah, taking his non-hackiness to like the extreme level to make sure it is completely documented.
Well, and maybe this is early in the book to be talking about this, but maybe not. The selection story is a pretty big chunk at the beginning of the book, maybe a quarter or a third of the book they talk about selection. And nothing in selection is abusive or vulgar or like really in your face. Like there's no like Full Metal Jacket Gunnery Sergeant Hartman characters.
Choke yourself.
I mean, they know they're all elite operators at this point, right? It's, are you the elite of the elite is what they're trying to get at. Now.
Well,
And they even kind of get at that with the whole like no helping rule, right? Like it's like we don't want to see how you work as a team. We don't want to see how you can lead. We want to see what you can do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like,
yeah, because I found that weird during the selection. Like it was all, I haven't been in the military. I've done some cadets a long time ago or whatever, but it was always like you kind of did stuff in groups, right? They shut you down in like groups of 5. But the whole selection, it was pretty much like, you interacted
all
at night
individual
in barracks, and it was all like, no, you're by yourself. Nobody helps each other, no talking during the day, whatever, they do their crazy marches, doing bearings, this, that, with all their weight, go from point A to point B to C, D, and then at the end of the day, they drop you off, and then you can talk to people, but during the day, don't get caught talking to people. Like, I found that very different compared to what you were.
And that's there was a lot of weirdness, like with like Andrew's saying, it's not like you hear about a lot of the selection or anything where like they're yelling and screaming at you. Like these guys were just sort of like vaguely indifferent, and like even the structure of everything seemed pretty laissez-faire. Like it was like your instructions are on the board, check them out.
Over here.
And just follow the directions and you'll be fine. But it wasn't like their schedule was planned out 12 weeks in advance, probably because, like I said earlier, they didn't know what they were doing tomorrow either. But like,
because Sergeant Major Shoemate was like, well, waxed my mustache, pretty much good to go now.
Yeah.
But I mean, despite the fact that they were, like indifferent to like partially caring, but not really, they were like playing weird mental games.
Caring
like
enough, like nobody got hurt or anything.
Yeah.
Not that people didn't get injured, but like nobody like was like abused or neglected or anything like that, right?
Yeah, it's not like it was SEER training. SEER training's later.
But like they played weird mental games that weren't really abusive, but were still weird. Like the whole take the photo on the first day with everyone, and then like his crack about like, this is how big the group is to get started. We'll see who's here.
Yeah, well, like you're gonna have a high attrition rate, and some of them like not their fault. Like I don't remember the one fellow's name, but the guy that literally walked his feet off.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
That was super
that was
gross.
one of his funny. Yeah.
I don't know if we're leading up to that or reading another section, but should we say what the final ruck was?
Well, I want to touch on one more thing with the ruck, because all of the, what do the Americans call them? Road marches?
Yeah.
All of the events that they did are unknown distance, unknown time, and for the most part they required, with the possible exception of the first one where it was like walk in a straight line, it was navigate, map and compass. Every time you get to a point, you get given your next point.
Yeah.
And when you get given your point, you get your map out, you get your compass out. This is all being done in Fort Benning in Georgia. So like it's sort of rolling hills and pine trees. There's not a shitload there.
Several, I think, thousands of acres, I think.
Well, and eventually they go to other places where they do get out into like, there's a national wilderness area that they end up training in that is just like the side of a freaking mountain.
Yeah.
But like every time you hit a point, you just get the directions to the next point. You get your map, your compass out, you figure out a route, you take a bearing, and you start walking. And you just keep doing it forever
until they say stop, which is like
right.
never.
And like the fuck games continue because like I think it was one of the later marches, one of the marches that was in the wilderness area on the side of a mountain. Like they got to the last point, and the guy's like, "Okay, your next point is whatever," and gives you the coordinates, and like you start plotting it on the map, and the guy's like, "Yeah, just go sit down. You're done." But if you didn't go through the effort,
I think they got him to plot the route because you had to show the cadre.
Yeah,
like, hey,
before
this is
you
the bearing you
step
gave me.
off.
This is the route, right? And then so you had to do all that, and then he was like, "Yeah, no, we're just fucking with you. Go sit." Right? And I mean, at some point, someone in selections called it quits because he's like, "Yeah, like I need structure. You not telling me what's going on tomorrow was driving him nuts." Right?
Well,
Some people work on a specific like. I need to know, I need a schedule, but like the unknown, like he couldn't even deal with just not knowing what he's doing in 4 hours, right? Not knowing what his whole day is going to date. It's pretty crazy how they can play simple games like that.
I think at the end of the day, that was what the selection process was about, though. They didn't want the guy that was there for the structure. They wanted the diamonds in the roughs, so to speak. The people.
Well,
that
the rest of the military can have the guys that need the schedule. That's what they do.
Yeah, exactly.
These guys needed to have the ability to work on the fly and do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Just be like, yeah, no, this is what you're doing now, right? Go walk here, go walk there, go pack your shit, go do that. Like, yeah, they needed the people that were just like, okay, this is what you're doing, right? Moment. Plans can change real quick because they were going to be, the elite of the elite that a phone call away or a drop of a dime, they can get called anywhere. And yeah, they needed people that were okay with, plans changing and not having specific structure like most other things in the military. It was pretty good.
Yeah, one of the funny stories about all that though is the one guy that ended up like getting that ride on the back of the motorcycle.
Yeah, that one was good.
And ends up going, a little bit too far and gets dropped off right in front of one of the cadre members. So basically gets disqualified instantly upon that.
Well, yeah, it was just like, yeah, and yeah, he just called it quits. He was like, it's not for me. Right.
Back in the book, I've got a couple of notes all together here. Chief Guard Hugh Gordon was one of my favorite. Gordon had been one of the very first members of the Special Forces back in the early 1950s. During World War II, he parachuted into Normandy with the 82nd Airborne Division on his 19th birthday. He was indicative of the men who provided our exterior security, and you can believe me when I tell you that security was never breached, not even by us. One night after a training exercise, Doc Smiley decided to take a shortcut to the building and climb the back fence rather than walk around all the way to the front gate. The next day, he told us that he was straddling the top of the fence when he heard a pump shotgun rack a shell into the chamber, and a calm voice announced, "Just drop your ass on the ground on this side of the fence." All the way to the ground, Smiley kept saying, "Don't shoot, Huck, it's me, Smiley." Mr. Huckabee then walked him to the front gate and logged him in. When he turned to walk away, Huckabee said that he'd known who it was all along, otherwise he would have shot him off the top of the fence. None of us tried hopping the fence after that little incident. Huck died at his post about 10 years later. He was found dead, sitting on the ground, back against the fence, and his shotgun across his lap. He suffered a heart attack while patrolling the perimeter. God bless all those old veterans. So this is talking in Benning. They actually took over what had been built as a stockade, a military jail, and they turned it into their headquarters because shoestring budgets and so forth. But all ex-Special Forces guys, all ex-Special Forces sergeant majors acting as guards for the facility that Delta procured.
Only,
That was that was
only the most badassness can watch over the fly.
that was after selection when he starts doing his regular.
Yeah,
phase
sorry,
of
this
force
is
training
like
at that point.
they've stood up the first couple of Saber Squadrons and they're trying to get Delta rolling,
Yeah.
and they've got a full-time place to operate out of.
The weird thing though
this
is
training though, right? This is not actually. They haven't actually become operators yet, right?
They haven't. Well, that was the next thing I wanted to touch on, because that's like literally down further this page. I just thought it was like, how badass is that? Is like all of your security guards are retired Special Forces sergeant majors.
It's like,
and like
badass.
Your headquarters
badass.
is
get down off the fence, son. Like,
you're headquartered in an abandoned prison, and for some reason they made them all plant a rose bush out front.
aesthetics.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love roses?
Roses are red, violets are blue. Climb this fence.
Get off the fence, or I'm going to shoot
shotgun.
you.
Yeah, I'll put that in. Exactly. It rhymes. It all rhymes. There's a method.
Pump some lead into you.
Exactly. So, we settled on the name operator to designate an operational member of the unit as opposed to a member of the support staff due to some legal and political situations. We couldn't use the term operative because that name had been given certain espionage connotations from the CIA. The term agent had some legal issues. An agent carries a legal commission to perform certain duties, and a governmental authority empowered by a state or federal constitution issues that commission. In our case, we would perform our duties under the authority of the federal government as administered by the Department of Defense and the Department of the Army. But in the military, only officers carry legal commissions from the President and are confirmed by Congress. Sergeants, who are non-commissioned officers, are authorized to perform their duties by virtue of appointment by the Secretary of the Army. Sergeants, therefore, cannot be agents of the government, and since almost every operational member of Delta Force is a sergeant, we needed to choose a different name for ourselves, hence, operator. If that sounds sort of convoluted, it's because it is. But if you work for any governmental entity, it will make perfect sense to you. Delta Force was loosely patterned on the organizational structure of the British 2-2 Special Air Service Regiment. The smallest unit was the 4-man team. 4 or 5 teams, along with a small headquarters element, constituted a troop. 2 troops, an assault troop and a sniper troop, formed a squadron. Each squadron had a small command element. When OTC-3 finished its training, we formed 2 squadrons, A Squadron and B Squadron. These were known as the Saber Squadrons. The selection and training detachment, like the Saber Squadrons, was composed of operators. We also had a signal squadron, which provided direct communication support for the unit, and a normal contingent of administrative, intelligence, operational planning, and support elements. At the top of the pyramid were the commander, the deputy commander, and the executive officer, the command sergeant major, and members of the commander's staff, such as the unit surgeon and psychologist. The very best people in the Army within their respective disciplines filled Delta Force's non-operational functions. Operators always knew that we were backed up and supported by the absolute masters of their profession, no matter what their specialty. Parachute riggers, administrative or finance clerks, cooks, supply personnel, communications specialists, or gunsmiths. You name the job, Delta folks were the best at it. Which...
Yes.
I mean, that's pretty cool stuff, right? Little history.
It's nice to know you got the best armor in the military at your disposal. Not just any, the best.
Yeah, no, it was pretty cool how it all came about, right? Like,
and how Beckwith laid the whole thing out, and how Beckwith based it on the SAS, and
yeah.
I mean, we've talked about the SAS a little bit. We haven't really talked about the British SAS aside from like the Rhodesian Sea Squadron SAS.
Yeah.
When we were talking about bush war stuff with, yeah.
Delta definitely drew a lot of stuff from them. You know, a lot of doctrine, a lot of the initial stuff that, you know, to you know, the backbone of what the SAS was about. They definitely adopted a lot of that because, I mean, you know, they were really the only, you know, tier 1 type operators at the time, and you know, they were pretty proven as well. as being a bunch of badasses. So why not?
Yes. I know. It was a fantastic read. I enjoyed it.
That was really good. Dave, do you want to take page 92?
Mm-hmm.
Shooting is both an art and a science, third paragraph.
Third paragraph.
See,
Yeah.
I bought the different book, so you guys are saying all these pages. I bought
you
like
got
it's the same
new
book.
one, I guess.
I don't know, but the pages are off because earlier you said page
Just
30
a different
and I started,
edition. Dave and I happen to have the same edition. So
Yeah.
Dave and I did some quality shooting time up at Milcon recently and had our matching books.
Yeah, no, so earlier you said like page 30, and I'm like, I go to page 30 and I start reading, and then I flipped it. It was 39 in my book, so I was like, don't ask me to read a specific page.
Yeah, no.
Well, I think it may be off because this one has pictures in it too, about halfway through.
Well, I got a few pictures. I got a few pictures, but yeah.
Like I said, Dave and I have the same edition of the book, so.
That's really cute.
It is. You should see our matching pajamas.
Hammers?
Of course. Shooting is both a science and an art. The science of shooting is principally concerned with exterior ballistics, what a projectile does in flight, how fast it initially takes off, how well it retains its energy, its flight path in relation to the sight path, how it is affected by atmospheric conditions, what it does upon impact, and how it delivers its energy to a target. A few other scientific matters are concerned with the mechanics of the equipment, the consistency of powder loads and bullet weights and shapes, the accuracy of the barrel, and the gun's inherent tightness or sloppiness. The art of shooting is purely human. That comes into the picture when we hold a gun with this pulsing, trembling, quivering, and shaking body of ours. When we calculate all sorts of variables and try to make the round go off at just the precise instant that will cause the bullet to impact a tiny spot exactly where it was intended to go. Even when you're very good at it, you're never quite satisfied. And when you first start out, it can be a humbling exercise. But the mastery of this skill is ground zero for the Delta Force operator. Without it, he would be some other type of being. Because when it gets right down to it, a Delta operator is an extremely skilled killer. He is like the wolf that becomes a shepherd. He will guard the flock, but make no mistake about it, he remains a deadly predator. Shooting is divided into two categories, short guns and long guns, and so are operators. Assault team members are known as short gunners and sniper observers are called long gunners. Everyone in OTC is trained on the long gun. Men chosen for sniper troops will be given specific and exhaustive training following their assignment. Instead of training with a fancy sniper rifle, we use the Army's standard M14, the predecessor of the M16. The M14 is the lineal descendant of the M1 Garand of World War II fame. The M14 is heavier than the M16, fires a much larger round, and has a greater range and power. Gussied up and accurized, it is an excellent gun for target match shooting. Modified and mounted with a ranging telescope, it was used by the Army as a sniper rifle for years. Delta snipers still use it for certain tasks, but for the pure purposes of training, we use it in its plain Jane form. There's no point learning to drive a Porsche until you've mastered the Ford. We spent our first 3 weeks of the course on the rifle range. It was a good, stress-free way to get to know one another. It gave us a chance to change some initial impressions we had of the other men in the course, especially some I had made. There were 2 guys in selection I disliked on sight, and it turned out the feeling was mutual. Even though we probably never spoke to one another during selection, my dislike for them continued to build in the weeks before we started OTC. One guy was a stocky Californian from the 5th Special Forces Group at Fort Bragg. The other was a dark, muscular guy from the Infantry Brigade in Alaska. I don't know why I disliked them so much in selection, but by the time we got to OTC, I was prepared to despise them, and they were equally prepared to return the favor. The Californian, Jerry Knox, was a fireball of a man. He had a sly sense of humor and more intensity of character than almost any man I've ever known. The muscle man, J.T. Roberts, was utterly courageous, one of the most courageous men I've ever met. JT hated parachuting, said he was terrified of it. I was jump mastering a jump one day, and as we were shooting up, JT kept up a running commentary about how much he hated jumping and how much it scared him. Checking his equipment prior to boarding, I asked him in exasperation, "If you hate it so damn much, JT, why have you stayed in airborne units for the last 15 years? It's voluntary, you know." He looked at me in surprise and said, "Hell, Eric, I just like being with I just like being with the kind of guys who like to do it." During OTC, we developed profound respect for each other and formed lifelong friendships, and this extended to every member as we gelled into a cohesive unit. This was the best group of men I've ever been associated with in my life. We had our differences now and again. That's only natural. And tightly knit clan, all the more so when it's clan populated by tough-minded men. But we always worked it out, our differences, even if working out got a little heated. But there was one ironclad rule in Delta: you never laid an angry hand on a brother operator. That was unforgivable and would be result in an immediate dismissal. It happened only once during my 8 years in the organization, and I don't believe it has ever happened since. So those first few weeks on the rifle range were valuable for a number of reasons. We got to know the character of our comrades, and we laid a common foundation on which to build core skills. Potential snipers were identified, chosen both for their natural talent and inclination to serve in that capacity. In those early days, we didn't have the luxury of taking years to develop sniper juice. The clock was already ticking faster than we realized.
That's good there. Thank you. So two things with that section. I mean, first off, the art and science of shooting, and like we're going to talk a little bit about guns in a minute because gun autism, but also they brought in instructors to teach them how to shoot like non-military people as well as like army marksmanship unit people. So there's also a bunch of other commingling with other government agencies, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, Explosives, the FBI HRT team.
So this is where they learn to shoot dogs and unarmed women. Okay. Yeah.
Also, go to the wrong address /plane.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, but they
did they not also bring in? Forgive me, I don't remember. Did they not also bring in like a grandmaster from IPSC?
Yes, they did.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean that just shows they were
in the gay jerseys all the time. But it goes to show there's something to be learned from it.
It shows that they're forward thinking.
Yeah,
right?
Well,
like
that was the thing. So like I wanted to talk about the art and science of shooting part, and also the level of camaraderie that they had. So like even though they, I don't like this guy, I don't really know why, and then like it's all good as long as there's like no actual fisticuffs, because fisticuffs will get you removed.
Yeah, but I mean I think they also whether they liked certain people or not, they knew how to play the political game as well. So like they would invite a number of people to come and train with them and have a day with them and do really cool secret operator stuff. Like, hey, you want to go blow some shit up on the range?
Okay,
Let's
so
do that.
To clarify, are we talking about the dog and pony show that we do for politics for funding, or are we talking about like the partner force training that like, let's have our snipers go work with like FBI HRT for a couple of weeks to run a sniper course?
They did both. So like when they're talking about like they would commingle and like our guys would go teach your guys some stuff, you teach us some stuff and do all of that and like interagency cooperation and like let's learn the best from the best, right? But then also like when they're talking about like dealing with politicians and like even like the airline guys and stuff like that to get access to like train on the airplanes, they're like, we brought them out, we let them shoot guns and blow some stuff up and do all this and like be a cool operator for the day and be like a unofficial member of Delta Force.
I remember that. Like, oh yeah, you guys are the Delta people from Delta Airlines. We've got some questions here. Just like mag dump a bunch of shit, and like if you hit that spot,
they would do. So they knew how to play that political game.
Oh yeah.
Where it was like either through working with other agencies and saying, like we'll show you some stuff, you show us some stuff, and we'll get that camaraderie and training that way because you guys are the best at this thing. Let's learn from you guys and work together. But then also the pure political, like we want to have our guys run around on your airplanes, which you totally don't need us to do. But like if you come and like shoot some guns and blow some shit up in our facility, that kind of greases the wheels for you to say yes. So like, come do that.
I think the excerpt, what I read from it, as far as like the camaraderie is concerned, it reminds me a lot of like my time at Connaught for championships, or this past month when we were at the Service Pistol Championships. When you shoot beside friends, it's intense pressure when you're on the clock, and then everybody is there for each other after the fact. Cheering each other on, making sure everybody stays in a good positive mindset. Only people that are there that have done it can understand it, and you just become that much closer with your friends when you do that kind of stuff together. And that's why I think this whole group
That's why
of
Dave and I
us-
have the same copy of the book.
fair.
They actually invented book cloning. It's not just the same copy, it is the exact same copy.
Yeah, I wrote the
Yeah.
post-it notes out in duplicate, one set for my book and one set for Dave's
Yeah.
book.
I would say, friends that shoot together definitely stay together for sure.
Yeah, and I would say, my experience, in shooting, obviously, with all of you guys and everything, but even just sort of traveling around, North America and taking classes where I don't know anybody, there is some of that. And I only imagine that gets even more close-knit as you get into more, specialized and elite groups like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would
So
expect.
I'm curious. Like I don't have my restricted because I was stupid and only did non-restricted. But
can
you
fix
guys
that.
have shot. I'm trying. Trust me. But you guys have done, IPSC, whatever other courses they are for course of fire for pistol competitions. How he mentions, not necessarily looking down the sights, but learning where your hand is compared to where your sight of
Following
picture
front
and what.
post.
Yeah, like
Instinctive
like, does that
fire and
apply?
point shooting. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
like-
yes, but no.
Yeah.
So your eye is only able to focus at one thing at a time because of the way that your muscles in your eye work. You can focus at a thing. It could be close, sort of mid or far, but wherever you focus, everything else in your sight picture is going to be blurry as a result because of the way that your eye constricts. So when you focus on the front sight, you can produce very accurate shots, very repeatable shots, but it tends to be slower. And obviously the target will be blurry as a result because you're hard front sight focus, which is the way that a lot of new shooters get taught how to shoot, is to focus on the front sight and the target will appear blurry because it's a very repeatable image.
Yeah.
In the type of combat shooting that they're doing where you're shooting terrorists,
And trying to
not
miss
focusing on the
hostages.
terrorist is maybe not the way to go. There's also a difference, and you'll see this with really good IPSC shooters. They can change their focus depending on the target presentation. So if the target is very close, you don't need to aim very precisely. You sort of point the gun near the target and you'll put holes in it.
Yeah, and that's the difference between like competitive shooting where millimeters matter and combat effective shooting where just general area, especially when it's like I'm going to kick in a door and rush the room.
Well, and kick in the door and rush the room. This is the other thing to consider in this is like peace through superior firepower. When you're doing a shooting match, it's you doing a shooting match. You're shooting some pieces of cardboard, whatever, right? When Delta is taking down a plane full of terrorists and hostages, it's not one Delta guy. It's a whole bunch of Delta guys. So you have to worry about like everything moving around and distraction devices going off and other things happening because they're happening. And also like armed terrorists and hostages.
Yeah, speed, surprise, and violence of action. Those are the things that win a fight, right?
Well, speed, surprise, and violence of action are important things to winning a fight. But also, if you're going to go to a gunfight, bring all of your friends.
Well, yeah. If it's worth shooting once, it's worth shooting twice. And 2 guns is always better than 1 gun.
Right. So there is a lot around like
that.
But I think short
3 or 4 reasonably accurate but very fast shots are going to be a lot better than 1 slow accurate shot. So like point shooting where you just kind of bring the gun up and use like hand-eye coordination and experience,
definitely a thing.
It's way faster, right? Because you could just draw that gun and know more or less where it's pointing, and if that thing is really close to you, you're gonna hit it, right? So you can just start firing from the hip, and as you need to punch out and then acquire the sights to get that final shot, but like that person's getting shot and reacting, and that means they're not shooting at you because they're busy getting shot and or taking cover or dying.
Well, hopefully dying, but also, getting inside of the OODA loop and like you getting to be in control of the situation, but also bringing like all of your friends with guns, certainly advantageous.
One more point before,
especially if they know how to use guns.
The first paragraph about ballistics, they are definitely getting into the realm of shooting where that's an elite level of like competitive type shooting that we focus on, that most levels of the military don't. They just they requisition 100 ammo,
machine gun go burr.
100 rounds of 7.62, put it in the gun and send it down range, and eventually one of them's going to hit. Whereas they're actually worried about the same things precision rifle shooters are worried about. Powders.
Well, so much so that they even developed their own load and projectile so that they could shoot without over penetrating.
True precision, right? True precision.
Well, but not just that, but just to develop, like, I mean, they could have just been like, fuck it, like, just use a 50 cal and hit the guy in the head and he's smoked from any distance. But they're like, but what happens if we've got a guy on an airplane and there's people behind him, but we still need to take him out?
And it needs to go through a windshield.
Well, so they started call Delta and you ask them for windshield, and Delta provides.
They started working on all of that stuff and solving some of those problems where like they developed a load that would go into the person
and then using two snipers
kill them, but not exit the person. So if they were just using like a regular 308 hunting load or whatever, like it probably would fly right through them.
Yeah. But you guys, I know most of you guys have done IPSC or some kind of pistol or many competitions in that scenario, right? Service rifle, maybe not lately, but I was curious how he explained the fact of, not looking down the sights and like picture, and how they taught them to, I know this is how you were taught to shoot, but this is how you got to learn to shoot now. If that made any sense to you guys, because you guys have done a bit more than I have for that.
Yeah, I'm probably the first person to admit to you that I am poor at a target focus sight picture. That is an area that I need to improve, and I know that, and it is one of the reasons why I avoid shooting IPSC and why I feel much more comfortable shooting service pistol, is because I'm much more comfortable with that sight picture.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a little like instinctive style shooting, and it takes some getting used to when you've been taught how to do it a different way. So like up close, I don't mind doing it because it's just pull the gun out and point it at something and shoot it.
Yeah. But if buddy's 40 yards away, not so much if he's,
Well, and that's the further the distance, the less comfortable I am doing it, because minutes of angle and all that.
I do a drill with new shooters when we're doing pistol stuff. If you take the front sight and you have your normal sight picture, and your front sight and your rear sight are normally aligned, equal amount of light and sight on either side, so it's like a normal sight picture, right? Yeah. If you take the front sight and you completely bury it so that it disappears, and you shoot the target and you're standing like, say, 4 yards from the target, 5 yards from the target. If you completely bury the front sight, you're probably still going to hit an IPSC target at 4 or 5 yards. If you take the top of the front sight and put it so that the very bottom of the front sight is at the top ears of the rear sight, again, you're probably going to be on the IPSC target, right?
Yeah.
And same thing left and right. But you're at 4 yards. It's a fairly forgiving target at 4 yards. If you go to 40 yards and you can't see your front sight any longer, and you're just looking through that rear notch,
you're putting it in the ground. Yeah,
it's like the round is way gone off cardboard.
Yeah.
So there is if you're close, it matters less.
Yeah. Especially if you're then talking like not just competitive shooting, But combat
like
shooting,
combat effectiveness is we're not
it
measuring
matters
zones
even
on
that
this, right?
matters even less, right? It's just you just
as the
gotta
Dalai
get it.
Lama said, you just shoot him until the anger leaves his body.
Yeah. Yes, that and mag changes should be done in front of the face.
Yes, so you can see.
Yeah.
It's in your operating area. You are an operator after all.
It does. The explanation, I think, does make good sense, but it is definitely a hard skill. I have found point shooting to be a very difficult skill to master, and I
completely whiffed at a target at 10 yards on the weekend. Everybody saw it.
I must have missed that.
I didn't pick up my dot. I took 2 shots at the very first target on the stage on the left, and I didn't see my dot, and I was like, yeah, I'm pointing at it. I'll pull the trigger twice to see what happens, and I didn't hit a goddamn thing. I had to step back and shoot at it again because that's how far off I was. So it's not as easy as it sounds.
That's no, it's not.
It's thousands of rounds every single day practicing.
Which is why I guess they got yelled at when they only went through 1 million rounds.
Yeah. Lightweight. Those are rookie numbers. You need to pump those numbers up.
Well, like 1 million rounds, yes, but for how many people and over the course of a year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, if I had untapped ammo stores of like however many shots I wanted.
Yeah, if I had unlimited ammo, I would also be very good at point shooting.
With free access to shoot houses, with unlimited 2x4s for new doors.
Unlimited ammo, even if you had unlimited supplies, how much could you actually shoot? Because like you're gonna get run down doing that. Because
it is. I mean, we were doing those service pistol practices, and those were pretty much all day practices, and we were going through about 400 to 450 rounds in the day.
Yeah, a normal day of service pistol practice for our team was 400 rounds.
Yeah, and I was fucking wiped. Like that was a tiring ass day.
And I was like mentally exhausted by the time it was time to drive home every day.
Yeah, like I could barely keep my eyes open. I only had to drive home like 15 minutes. so yeah, 1,000, 2,000 rounds a day of like, run after run after run after run. Like that's that's intense. What's the next section here?
Well, I wanna jump way far ahead.
Mm-hmm.
It's the chapter called Aftermath, which in my book is 205.
Mm-hmm.
It's a terrible thing to be part of failure. It doesn't matter if the failure wasn't due to anything you did or didn't do. You still didn't accomplish the mission, and that's a wretched, bitter, hateful thing to bear. Fault, fate, and bad luck played their part, certainly. But it is important to realize that we have the ability to manufacture our own fate when we want to. We can sum up intestinal fortitude and proceed when things look bad, or we can find plenty of reasons to quit if we don't want to go forward. A sufficient number of helicopter crews elected to quit, and that is what doomed the mission. Crashing a helicopter into the C-130 while B Squadron was aboard was just icing on the cake. Colonel James H. Kyle, USAF, retired, the Air Force commander of the operation, takes a close look at the air portion of the mission in his superb book, The Guts to Try. His conclusion: it is my considered opinion that when we came within a gnat's brow of success, despite all the obstacles, frustrations, and human failings, and bad luck, despite all this, we were on the brink. We were there. We had a combat-savvy commandos of Delta Force within spitting distance of our objective. I knew Charlie Beckwith and his men, their attitudes, their skills, their competence, and their leadership, and I have no doubt that we would have gotten them to Tehran and had pulled it off. There's also ample evidence from former hostages interviewed that suggested the rescue attempt would have been successful. Think about it. All that was lacking was the guts to try. That's a pretty severe indictment, but one I also believe true. So what's the outcome of all this? Well, of course, there was the inevitable blue ribbon panel chartered to review the operation, to determine the reasons for its failure, and to make recommendations to set those problems right. And they go on to talk about the 160th Special, it's the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, and they talk about the formation of JSOC later on.
What happened with that mission, though? Refresh my memory.
So this is when they crashed all the helicopters in Iran during the hostage crisis. There's a Ben Affleck movie about it called Argo. People might have
Yeah.
seen.
I was gonna say I need to watch that movie. I haven't seen it. I heard it's pretty good.
I haven't either, but that was apparently a movie they did about it, so I was looking for a touchstone for
No,
listeners that watch those sort of movies.
It's not a bad movie, but yeah, no, it's not a bad movie. I'll give it that. But yeah, no, it's pretty crazy.
So, but the on talking about failure, because like again, these guys are probably the most competent combat people in America across all their services, across the whole U.S. military. They have probably the best people in Delta Force. Not to say there's not good people in other services or another special operations group, but like sometimes it doesn't work out. And the politicians and the armchair quarterbacks are going to go and tear apart everything that you've done and all of the other outcomes of that. But like sometimes shit just does not work out.
Yeah, you're in weird situations where there are things and variables that you just cannot possibly predict or plan for, and it just goes sideways for no reason.
The boy with his goats.
Yeah.
They just roll up on you. You can't plan for that. It just happens. You just gotta roll with the punches.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why like sometimes things go wrong. And I mean, forming the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment is probably a great outcome from this. Not that it's people died on that operation. They destroyed millions of dollars of aircraft. It fucking sucks. But to have a dedicated Special Operations Aviation Regiment to deal with this in the future, yeah, they probably should have had that before.
And
It's
if it
good
didn't
that they've got
happen
one.
then, it would have happened at some point.
Yeah.
Well, and same thing, getting JSOC created and making it its own command and putting Delta under JSOC.
Yeah.
Because again, like nothing against Beckwith. The ideas are solid, the leadership is there, but you can't have cowboys running tier 1 units doing counterterrorism on behest of like the US government.
Yeah.
Right? Like you need to have some checks and balances with that.
Yeah. And I mean, if you guys haven't, Relentless Strike, which is the book on the founding of JSOC, which kind of covers a lot of like, you had all these different groups and they were all doing their thing, but all needed to be kind of unified under one command. It is a really good read as well.
Perhaps in a few months we might visit that. Possibly. Sounds good.
I'd like that. Dave, do you want to take the bottom of 207? A lot of people. Last paragraph.
7. Yep. A lot of people have asked me what kind of man Charlie Beckwith was, and it's a question I've always had difficulty answering. Colonel Charlie Beckwith was both a very complex and simple man. He was a man of extremes who lived with, commanded, and held the respect of men of extremes. When I knew him, he was a large, blustery man with a, not sure about that word, mercurial temperament. Around the men, Charlie tended to act more like a senior NCO than an officer. His most trusted confidants were his sergeant majors. That's not to say he was overly friendly with the troops, but he did have an affinity for his boys. That was both obvious and genuine. He was the only field grade officer I've ever known who would provoke rough and tumble verbal exchanges with his subordinates and not fall back on the protection of rank if he found himself being bested. Charlie had no respect for a pushover. He liked a good tussle and he expected to get as good as he gave. But there was never any doubt as to who was in charge. He could chew ass like an old time first sergeant. In fact, I believe I still have some of his teeth marks in my posterior. Charlie wasn't a subtle man, but when the occasion called for the exercise of guile, he could be as cunning as a serpent. He was also quite emotional, as he readily admitted. He was easily moved to anger or joy. He was incapable of hiding his feelings. He admitted that he would never be confused with an intellectual, but he wasn't a dull man, far from it. He went to great pains to select his staff and subordinates for their mental depth and thinking abilities. He liked having intelligent people around him. He admired great thinkers, and he was a voracious reader of classical literature and history. The colonel was a staunch advocate of the philosophy, when in charge, charge, and he acted on it, hence his nickname of Chargin' Charlie. He gained a reputation in Vietnam for getting troops killed needlessly because of his impatience and his reckless disregard for danger. A lot of men in the Special Forces community even used that as their excuse for not trying out for Delta Force. Odd, but I never saw any of those guys show up for selection after Charlie was gone. I don't know the truth about those rumors, but knowing Colonel Beckwith, there was probably a little something to them. I do know that he was keenly hurt by the whisperings, and I know from personal experience that Beckwith felt intense responsibility and concern for the men under his command. He never stopped learning how to exercise the responsibilities of a commander and always worked to improve his leadership methods and abilities. But with Charlie was also a soldier, and a mission accomplishment is the first priority of a combat leader. Charlie Beckwith was a man who truly and deeply loved America and all she stands for. A man who would do anything he believed to be right to protect our nation and its citizens. He was a moral man and held human life as the most precious thing in existence. He was utterly selfless, never spared his person, and never shirked a duty or danger. He was a commander who wouldn't send you where he wouldn't go himself and always acted what he thought was in the best interests of the nation, the army, and the unit, and damn the consequences to his career. I do not believe there was any other officer in the United States Army who had the integrity, the perseverance, and the sheer guts to do the job Charlie Beckwith did in forming and breathing life into 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. At the end of his life season, that was one hell of a harvest to bring in. Colonel Charles Alvin Beckwith was a great American, a great commander, and a great man. He passed from his life on 13th June 1994. He is highly revered and greatly missed by his comrades.
Could you imagine being in a room with him and Mersenko all at the same time? Like, there were some men among men back when these units were formed and everything. Like,
you could definitely tell he's just a straight up badass out of Vietnam. Kind of reminds
but I
me a
guess
little
like
bit.
that whole like Vietnam, Korea era, like hard times make hard men, and they certainly did, right?
Yeah.
Fuck.
He's the kind of guy that you want leading. You wanted leading you, right? He had your best interests at heart, and he wanted to get the job done.
I don't
and
know.
any means
There's a lot
necessary.
of. I don't know. There's a lot of field grade officers in any militaries in Western countries now that have these sort of attitudes.
Yeah. Tell me
No.
about it.
Well, I mean,
Definitely not. Back then, 100%.
Well, but like
now-
these guys had been to
Back then, this
combat,
is a
they'd
guy-
lost people, so they knew the consequences of shitty decisions. So that influences them when it's their turn to send people. But now that like there's very few leaders that have had actual long-term combat experience, they don't know how to make those decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough, but I don't know. It's also.
I mean, and you throw in all the wokeness and all of the other stuff on top of it, right? Like,
it's a different time and it's a different set of experiences, and I get that. But it's also there is the wokeness and the risk aversion of today. And I mean, like, I know every generation is like this. Everyone says they played their music louder and they were better and their training was harder and they walked to school uphill both ways in a snowstorm, and every generation after that theirs is lesser and weaker, right? Like, I get that.
Yeah. Except sometimes it's true.
I mean,
well,
I feel,
and this
like
might be one of those
standards
cases where it's true.
Yeah, I feel like the standards kind of, from like, after post World War I up till 2000s.
Well, I think it's much like anything.
A Marine was expected to do the 10 miles, a 10-mile ruck march from 1919 to 2019, but now it's if you have this aversion, or if this is wrong, or if the sergeant major talked to you inappropriately, you don't have to do it anymore. Like, it's definitely changed. It was definitely one thing and it's definitely another now.
And this is like, so there's certain, things that are inappropriate for the workplace. And if you want to look at it as like the military as a workplace, it kind of is. But also, there's some kind of exceptions, right? Like you're in peacetime, sure, it's like any other thing. Maybe not even, because like in peacetime, it should be pretty easy. But you're not training for peacetime, you're training for wartime if and when that arises. And therefore, like the things that are not necessarily appropriate for other workplaces become totally appropriate for the military, because it's the military and they're going to potentially be in very harsh situations.
The whole idea is to go and do violence.
Do violence, take lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Close and destroy the enemy.
Yeah.
That's their job.
Pretending otherwise is a setup, is a recipe for failure.
And it's not just like, and it's not just like it's the our guys have that mission. The other side has the exact same mission.
Yeah.
So like someone is trying to destroy you.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to be a little bit more badass, a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, a little bit smarter in order to be better than them, which means that you better be pushing yourself as hard as you can, as often as you can, to get better at those things, to have the best chance of winning. And if they're doing anything less than that, they're doing themselves and the nation a disservice. And I don't care what nation that is, they're all doing that if they're not pushing themselves as hard as they can.
You made me think of something else, another maybe less controversial senior officer than Beckwith. Patent quote for you. No dumb bastard ever won a war by going out and dying for his country. He won it by making some other dumb bastard die for his.
Yeah, absolutely.
No.
Which actually, in that same vein, I've got another note. This is much later. We're getting towards the end of the book. Running operations in South America. This is in El Salvador. Andres raced up alongside the Cayuca just as the two boats came gunwale to gunwale. The smuggler popped up from the bottom of the boat like a jack-in-the-box, spitting mad. "Why did you shoot at me?" he shouted at Andres. Andres was so surprised, he snapped back just as quickly. "Why didn't you stop when I told you to?" The smuggler, a weather-beaten old man, answered, "I thought you were pirates. I'm carrying a valuable commodity." Andres quickly checked the Cayuca to see how much water she was taking on. He was amazed to see the bullets he had fired at a range of less than 30 meters had not even penetrated the hull of the boat. After verifying the boat was indeed carrying a load of weapons and ammunitions, he attempted a serious talk with the composed and quite nonchalant captain. "Abuelo, why are you doing this thing? Why do you put yourself at such risk to carry weapons to a people you do not even know? Do you not realize what you are doing is very dangerous?" The old man eyed Andres calmly for a few seconds before he answered, "Young gentleman, do you not know what is going on in my country? The times, they are bad, and they were bad before, during the year of the Somozas. But at least then, if you were quiet, and you did not meddle in politics, and you voted the way the village alcalde told you to vote, you could live relatively unmolested. But today, everything is politics in Nicaragua. One is no longer allowed the luxury to be quiet. Now, one must be militant. One must be a revolutionary. One must strike a blow against the imperialism. One must act to show solidarity with the revolution. It is required of us." Thought that might be relevant to other world
current
events.
times, possibly.
Yeah. I really enjoyed that story because he lets the guy go with like a slap on the wrist kind of a thing,
Yeah, I mean they confiscate all the guns.
Yeah, but the really cool thing is he tells the guy like, "I'll come back and visit you when all of this is over," and he actually
Andres does come back and do that, and unfortunately the captain, the gun smuggler, has passed away at that point. But
yeah. But no, I thought that was a pretty cool story, just to say that, like, you know, this guy, like, he did, in my opinion, he did the right thing by letting that guy go. Because, I mean, the guy's in a tough spot where, like, if he doesn't do this, like, he's going to basically get executed, or his family is going to get, you know, messed up. So he does the thing that he's got to do, whether he wants to do it or not, and then gets caught. But yeah, they let the old man go. Because,
which, I mean, like, I think that's the right thing to do. And I mean, they did confiscate the weapons, and they did tell him to, like, well, just lie and say that you did the thing, right? Like, tell them you smuggled the weapons that you were supposed to smuggle.
Yeah, and that the other side is lying, because they lie. Yeah.
But I like that couple of lines there at the end. One must be militant, one must be a revolutionary.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not so much to strike a blow against imperialism, but I mean...
Well, no, but
I suppose the empire of nothing is an empire all the same.
One must not just be, you know, against communism. One must be actively anti-communist, so to speak.
Helicopter noises, so to speak?
Yes.
We the communists now?
No.
They've got to just reach terminal velocity over the Bay of Santiago.
Any bay, really. I'm not picky about the geography.
I don't care where. They can hit concrete for all I fucking care.
I've got,
as long as we paint a target.
I've got one more, probably rather long passage. Unsurprisingly, since we started the book knowing that that Haney did 8 years, eventually he has a very successful career. He gets promoted and he leaves Delta and becomes one of the youngest sergeant majors in the Army. Sergeant major being like the senior most enlisted rank in the U.S. Army.
Yeah.
The world kept revolving. The passage of seasons marked our circuit around the sun, and the assumptions of bowstring force marked our own method of tracking years. By midsummer 1986, I was serving in the Selection and Training Detachment as a senior instructor for OTC. I had moved to S&T earlier in the year after being injured on a mission with the British Special Air Service. I had completely recovered from the physical damage, but truth be told, I was tired. I was slow to admit it to myself, but the last 8 years had taken a toll. The life of a Delta Force operator was physically demanding. You had to keep your fitness level of a professional athlete with no off-season. But more than that, it extracted a decided mental and emotional cost, and that, ultimately, was more draining than anything else. For a few months, I had been toying with the idea of finding another assignment, overseas somewhere, or maybe back with one of the Ranger battalions. It was a hard decision to make, because from here, there was no such thing as up. Professionally, any change from Delta Force would be retrograde. And every time I started to give it some serious thought, I would be overcome with a sense of guilt. We had lost a lot of men, with debilitating injuries, retirements, reassignments, and deaths. We were barely keeping up with attrition. It was all we could do to keep our personnel numbers at anything close to the unit requirement. And if I elected to leave now, I would be deserting the unit and just adding to the problem. The decision was taken out of my hands, with the results of a recently concluded Sergeant Major's promotion board were released, and I had been selected by the Department of the Army for promotion to the rank of Sergeant Major. But there was more. A subsequent board had been conducted to select candidates for appointment to the rank of Command Sergeant Major, the highest non-commissioned rank in the Army, and I was one of the handful of soldiers selected for that position. It was unbelievable. At 1 month short of my 34th birthday, I was the youngest man ever selected for appointment to Command Sergeant Major. Now I would have to find a new home. There was only one Command Sergeant Major in any organization. Dan Simpson was our current CSM, and he jokingly told me, "Haney, I ain't leaving just because you got promoted." That settled it. If the Army was good enough to honor me with promotion to the highest position an NCO could ever hope for, I would repay that honor the best way I knew how. I would return to the regular infantry where the rubber really meets the road, and give back to the units who carry the brunt of warfare as much of what I had learned in the last 16 years as I could. When I considered where I would like to serve, there was only one answer: Panama. Things were still happening down there. I was always going in and out of Panama on missions to Central and South America, and occasionally I would bump into old friends that were stationed with the 193rd Infantry Brigade. There was another attraction. One of these days we were going to have to sort things out with the Noriega regime, and when it happened, I wanted to be in on the action. And subsequently, Haney does get his appointment to the 193rd Infantry Brigade, and he is the youngest command sergeant major in the Army. And I believe he went on to serve for something like another 18 or 20 years and retired out.
What's interesting to see, like him talking about like going to Panama and how Panama was a hotspot, and then the fact that we covered the Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and he spent a lot of time in Panama and was talking about like the jackals and everything being in Panama.
Well, and in the late 80s, it's the same time period, right? Like
well, and that's
87, 88.
Yeah, so, was he one of those people? I guess it depends on how true the other book was, right?
Well, I feel like Haney's book is more honest and realistic. But the other thing I wanted to touch on in that passage,
I would agree with that.
Dealing with the promotion, like knowing that you're not just like the top of your game, but like the top of all the games. Like there is no next step. There is no promotion. There is no upward mobility. Like imagine you're playing a major league sport. There's like no. Well, okay. I'm again trying with a touchstone for the listeners, but like, I don't know. Like you're not just like the best basketball player or the best football player. You're the best athlete. You're not just like the gold medal winner for whatever, the 50-meter breaststroke, because I find that one funny. You're Michael Phelps, right? Like that's why it's funny. Yes. Thank you. We are all prepubescent boys.
Yes.
Boobies. But like you're like the Michael Phelps of swimming, right? Like you're not just good at like a specific sport, you're good at like all of it. And there is no career progression with that.
Yeah.
So to decide to take the appointment and then just go back to working a line infantry unit, like that's a pretty big step backwards. But
I mean, his reasoning behind that is pretty incredible.
Well, and he goes and he does it, right? And he spends a total of 20 years in the Army.
Well, yeah, because like where could he make the biggest impact? Like if he went to like, some other tier 1 or like tier 1.5 or tier 2.
There is no other tier U. Like that's the thing is like the U.S. military, the tier 1 unit is Delta, right? Like there's no. Yeah, okay, you can go down to Special Forces, you can go to a Ranger Regiment, you can go...
Well, but that's the thing, like, so even if you went to one of those, like, okay, so there's a handful of, more than a handful, but like a relative handful of people he could do something with and make them marginally better, right? Because they should already be pretty close to their full potential at that point, if they aren't already. But the average infantry guy has so much more room to grow and learn. So yeah, going to those guys and teaching them all of the stuff that he can from his experience is going to make a much bigger impact than just working with some other, elite unit.
Yeah, no,
so his reasoning is sound, but yeah, it's a major step backwards for him. But for those people that got to work with him, that is the opportunity of a lifetime.
No, I think that's true. And I mean, so he was involved in Operation Just Cause, and they don't really, I don't remember it being talked about in the book, but he was involved in Operation Just Cause in Panama in '89. He did do his 20 years in the U.S. Army. He was in from 70 to 90. This. It is impressive that this dude was able to find pants that he could stick his giant balls in.
Yeah.
You know what though? He probably got.
And be as humble as
Watts.
he is, though. Be as humble as he is.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, be humble, but he probably got Watts Taylor to make
Yeah.
pants for him.
Yeah, I guess
Probably.
like after the 70s, Watts' Taylor was out of business with him not really being able to do anything anymore. So he relocated to Delta, and
As one does. I mean,
yeah,
it's a natural progression.
Well,
Yeah,
you got to have
no,
the best guys
that's-
working in the support roles.
That's it.
yeah,
That's it.
exactly.
It's the best
The-
cooks, best,
The other thing that
That's
was,
the
I
matters.
thought, kind of just in closing, I thought that was interesting was after he got out of that he went into the whole child trafficking, human smuggling stuff,
Yeah,
and works in a not-for-profit rescuing people.
yeah. No, I mean this guy is definitely just been there and done that, 10 times over, and
It's just crazy, right? Reading a few of the
Right.
books,
just
Um, like reading any other book from anything, right? Like how selection will go or their type of training or whatever, right? Whether modern 10, 20 years ago or whatever, right? Like it kind of throws a loop on like, how did they get through? Like, no, you're by yourself. And like eventually they weed out like a fuckload of people. And then towards the end, they weed out a few extra people, right? Like the difference between the selection and like how everything goes and everything that's required for them to do is just so different than everything else you'll read in almost any other book. It's just kind of like, I don't know, it just kind of throws you for a loop, and it's a good read though. But yeah, I really enjoyed the book. It was well written.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, really, really good.
Yeah.
I enjoyed reading that. Again, Haney is a very good writer, like a very
Well
gifted
written.
writer.
right? It is
Well,
enjoyable to read. It's
Very enjoyable to
thought
read.
out.
It's very gripping, and it's written at a relatively high level. Like it is not written in third grade English, which I appreciate. Because a lot of the news
No,
articles that we
it's-
read are not written to a very high caliber.
But it's also not it's not written too complicated for simple-minded people like myself. Right? Like it's an easy read, but it's very thorough. It's explained. It's well written. But
I'm
it's
not sure if I agree
too
about thorough, but yes. There's definitely like
Yeah.
some tactics, techniques, and procedures that are just glossed
Yes.
over that I would like to know.
Yeah.
Like, but how did you guys actually do that?
well,
though?
and so this is one of the interesting
Yeah.
things about. So he caught a little bit of flack about writing this book for giving away some of that stuff.
I don't feel like any of the TTPs were really.
Yeah, and
So-
I'm sure by the time, like, given how
I mean, his training regiments were from the 70s, right? I'm sure it's changed now, right?
well, absolutely, like, I mean, even if
probably
this guy,
only
like,
to a certain point.
I mean,
I-
if this guy
yeah.
had written this book even a little bit earlier, I imagine that they would have changed their training and this and that at least significantly enough that like it's not going to give anyone an advantage, because those guys have got to be honing their skills, daily. So things change so rapidly for them. And like if you don't have the budget to be doing 1 million rounds a year or more,
Yeah.
even
And
if
a
you
million
know
rounds
they're
of 45, like that stuff's
Yeah.
pricey. It's not 9mm.
For sure.
and I mean, if you don't have the budget for that and the time to do that, even if you're fully aware of their, how they operate, you're still going to be slower. So
Yeah.
but yeah, he caught a little flack with writing some of this stuff, but it's like this didn't give away, and I think that like Andy McNabb gave away more in how to do things in his fiction books
Yeah.
than this guy gave away in his nonfiction books.
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
like, one part of
honestly, you look down,
like-
you get down to it. It's drills and ammo and you know,
Yeah.
just perseverance. Like that is the way. There's no.
I mean, if he's
fucking-
writing
there's
a
no
book
secret.
about a secret unit, it's not even a secret that
Yeah,
the
there's
unit
no-
exists anymore, right?
No,
So
it's not a secret. That's not a secret. There's no secret to the success, really. At the end of the day, I mean, yeah, some of the tactics for breach entry on planes and stuff like that, yeah, sure, is kind of proprietary. But at the end of the day, you know,
Yeah, I
getting
mean,
to
I'm
put
not
5,000
looking for the Bible of like what the height of all the doors on every model of aircraft is.
Yeah,
Although, I mean,
like,
that would be technically
sure.
interesting to put in my library.
5,000
Yeah.
rounds a day in the shoot house is not, you know, that is basically the
yeah,
recipe.
if you needed a book to tell you that that's a good thing, you're an idiot. Yeah.
Yeah. Right, but like one part that threw me off of, you know, really reading it and realizing that this was done like years ago was when I don't remember who, but he says this is your final exam, and I believe that one of that will be tested your abilities to fulfill this. I like to think that as an exercise in resourcefulness, and before you finish, I believe you will think it that way. On the table, there is a folder for each of you, marked with your code name. Inside, you'll find $1,000 in cash and a set of instructions. You will find an emergency contact phone number on the inside cover of the folder. Use that number in the event of an emergency that requires you to come out of the play of the exercise. In all other situations, you are to rely on your designations covered for status and action. You do not have an authority to break any national, state, or local laws. However, you may treat regulations according to your own discretion. And by the way, the FBI is looking for you in 3 hours. But it makes you think, like, how far will $1,000 go nowadays?
They
It's
probably
like a
up
final
to
exam.
They probably
And
up
then,
to
like,
10 G's, yeah.
Yeah, you know, but like as time goes on, right? Like they change states, like that starts in Washington, right? And they end up in.
But I mean, you can take civilian level courses that teach you some of the espionage stuff that they were doing, right? You know, just
Yeah.
basic counter surveillance. You know,
Yeah.
So, I mean, like reading that training exercise was probably one of the most fun parts of the book.
mhm.
And I was just like,
'Cause
man,
you've done some of that stuff.
yeah, I was like, man, I but like never to that scale. Like I would love to do something on like
Right.
even a
And then
third of that
Here's
scale. Like just
$1,000. You got to do this.
not even something like that that's like citywide or half a city wide versus like the couple of blocks that I've run something like that on. But like just to be like, here's a bunch of people, there's a bunch of other people that are looking for you. Here's very little information. Make your drops, do your things.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But it was
it's
just
stupid fun.
a little bit further than that, right? When he says he goes to like similar to a Walmart, I guess you could say, he buys like a tent, this, that, everything, and he starts like explaining what he bought. I was like, buddy, you're at $1,500. How'd you
Yeah,
make
but
it
that's
with
$1,500
$1,000 rented
now.
a van?
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, you know,
Back
but
then,
I-
he
I
spent
must
like
do that.
back then he spent $50. He still had $950.
Yeah, right.
Bro, like
And he's like, oh, I
$1,000
rented
of gas isn't
Yeah.
going to get you very
And the
far
tent's
these
probably still usable today.
Yeah.
Yes, right. I rented a van. No,
You
no,
still
I put
got
a
it,
cash
yeah.
deposit. What the fuck you mean a cash deposit? Like, there's no cash deposit for renting a vehicle of some sort. Right? He rents a van, and like, yeah, no, it was just crazy to see, you know, at
Yeah,
$1,000
how much the
far.
world has changed in
Yeah,
a couple of
but
decades.
that was a good part, right? Like the whole like espionage and like, you know,
Oh yeah.
dead drops and everything and how we explained everything. Like, yeah, no, it was that was a good
That was
part.
definitely
Yeah,
one of my
just
favorite parts of the book was that whole
for sure.
Well, let's any other closing thoughts? Anything else that we've overlooked or missed?
No?
Read it.
Yeah.
Read
That's
it,
good.
and also
Yes.
like Beckwith's book is on my bookshelf upstairs for like things to read yet,
Yes.
because I've got Beckwith's. His book was Delta Force, a memoir.
Yeah, I think it was just like Delta Force. Like, yeah, no, they're both good reads. I had not read this book previous, but I had read Beckwith's book once or twice before, and they're both fantastic books. They're just, in my opinion, they're two different sides of it.
Yep, I can see that.
Beckwith's book is the whole political, logistical side of trying to organize literally what Haney went through for training, right? It's the whole years prior to that, all the political insides of it, and, you know, how hard it was for. So they're both fantastic books. They're just both two different spectrums. One's more
how do I acquire an abandoned prison to have as a headquarters?
Yes. Yeah. And this one is just like, how did we utilize it, right? Yeah, no, we built the shoot house, and so they're both fantastic books. Yes, so well worth reading for sure.
All right, I think that wraps that up. Next month, Julius Evola, A Handbook for Right-Wing Youth, so as to stop getting picked on by Chris about only doing left-wing books.
Yeah. I mean, it's got right-wing in the title.
Yeah, I mean, it feels pretty obvious.
I mean, I think we appeased you on that one.
Yeah.
I would say that looks like everybody enjoyed Inside Delta Force, though. I'm glad everybody enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, I thought it was a
great book. A good read.
Yeah.
Very good.
Maybe not the best book I've read this year, but certainly the best biography I've read this year.
It's very good, very well written. I mean,
the introduction. I think I was sitting in the hotel room with Dave, and I read the introduction out loud. I'm like, I'm gonna have to read this whole thing on the show.
Yeah, no, you totally said that.
Dude, I think this was like roughly a 13-ish hour book or something like that. So not like a short book, but I think I plowed through this in like a week or less just because it was so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just want to keep reading it. And that's what I mean. That's why I've read it so many times. It's like, I just feel like reading this today.
Yeah, like I've read much shorter books that have taken me a lot longer to complete. Mm-hmm. Like, because it's just like, they're good, but they're so dense, and you're just like, I just can't do any more today. Whereas this one, it just like you kept wanting to read more.
Yeah.
Because it's just,
it wasn't too complicated. It was nice. It was simple to read. It kind of kept you on the edge. Like, you know, how did that, like, you know, towards the end of selection, how did that like 40-mile ruck go? And then Buddy realized he was on the wrong road, and he's like, fuck, I gotta cut across and like make this 40-mile ruck into like a 60-mile ruck or a 50, you know? Like, it was just like, wow, man. Like, you know, it did, like, it was very simple. It was
These
good.
Guys were read it. Just read it.
Just read it. I like that. That's I think that's a good place to leave it. Let's go around. We'll go clockwise again. The same. I think we're in the same order as we started in, although Gavin has disappeared and reappeared on more than one occasion.
Yes.
We'll start with Pierre. Pierre, where can everyone find you, and are we ready to make any special announcements?
Oh, we are ready to make special announcements. So as you can tell from 3 out of the 4 panelists, because someone decided to be a douche, not get the info.
I didn't get the memo. Mine's in the other room.
Check the goddamn bulletin board.
Yes.
I didn't get the bulletin board, but I just put mine on because it's that fucking comfortable.
It is.
I knew this was all going. So, yes, we are ready. We are doing a pre-sale for Ragnarok Tactical and CPP sweaters because we live in Canada. And sweaters are good. So, sweaters and everything, yes. We're ready to go, man. You can see Andrew's a little bit better than mine because his camera's better. But
okay, it's a podcast. Most people aren't going to see it.
No, they're that good that even the audio listeners.
Just if I hold the sweater up to the microphone, if you can hear that.
Oh
yes.
Yeah.
Right.
See, but that also gets people to YouTube's and fast forward to the end, which looks like more views, which makes it
awesome.
I mean,
except they're hearing this at the end, so whatever.
So
tell your friends to fast forward.
Sweater. Pre-order sweaters is a thing that is happening through Off the Wall Customizing. Pierre is taking care of all of that. Do we have a final retail price?
We're doing 65 plus $10 shipping and tax. Send
Super.
an email. We're doing a month promo or month pre-sale. Sorry, not promo. It's going to take a little bit. We're trying to get as many people available as many people involved as possible. If
So you've
anybody
got a
has any
month.
questions,
We'll put it on Discord. We'll put it in the show notes. I'll put it on the website. All that good stuff. But you got to get in touch with Pierre and you got to do your pre-order stuff so that he gets the right amount of sweaters. Because believe it or not, sweaters not terribly inexpensive.
Yeah,
they're not cheap.
Right. So we want to make
quality
sure
ones are definitely not, and these are
and
definitely
I have
quality.
to say this is pretty
They're very
decent.
soft. Yeah,
I'm
One
happy
of the
with
nicest
this.
sweaters I've ever worn. Honestly, like it's
They're
so
very
nice and
nice.
soft.
Yeah.
So
nice.
get in on that. Get in touch with Pierre through what's the best place? Email, probably off the wall customizing at gmail.com.
Yes, off the wall customizing gmail.com, or I don't know. There's a bunch of other stuff that my wife has set up for social medias. So if you're on any of those stuff, those thingamabobbers, go for that. But yeah, email is easiest. We're only doing black for both. So it'll be black sweaters, whether it's CPP, Ragnarok, size. And yeah, we're going to get a pre-order going.
Just like Ford, you can have it in any color you want as long as it's black.
That's exactly it. So that we've got that going. I'm also going to get a pre-order going for women's cut t-shirts, women's style, girl body person's cut, more curvier t-shirts because it's been requested.
Guys can wear them too if you want.
Gender neutral. Yes.
No, the ones that we have are gender neutral. The ones that we're getting are designed for girl body people with the curves.
We can't do that. That's sexist.
Exactly.
Yes, it is. Boobies. See, prepubescent boys. So if you're interested, there was a poll on Discord a while ago. If you're not on our Discord server, you should probably get on our Discord server and come and hang out if you do the Discord thing. I'm going to set up some stuff over the next couple of days to deal with getting the right amount of quantity for women's cut Ragnarok and CPP shirts, but they will be an inventory item that we're just going to sell as regular t-shirts. But I want to make sure that we get kind of the right quantity and sizes and styles, because I don't want to order like 100 large women's shirts and find out that you're all like double XS's or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I don't know women's t-shirt sizes.
Super
Super extra small.
Women shirts confuse me.
Yeah, me too. But whatever, we'll work it out. We'll get that going. I just need to know roughly how many we need. Unlike the sweaters, which we need to know exactly how many we need.
Yes, it would be good.
We need to put an order for hats in again. I lost mine in the lake earlier.
We can deal with hats. Right now we're dealing with sweaters.
Dave was out
and
fishing
t-shirts.
with his guns and lost his hat along with his guns in a tragic boating accident.
I just got in the whole throwing overboard mood, and it went and it sank. Couldn't find it after that.
Sweaters, do your pre-order, off the wall customizing, t-shirts. Get in touch with me. Let me know what size women's style t-shirt you're looking for, so we get roughly the right product spread. Men's t-shirts are easy. It's just like a size distribution curve. You get a lot of larges and you get some less mediums and some less XLs, and it usually works out like pretty well. Women's t-shirts are like a mystery to me. I don't know. Do we order 2? Do we order 20? I don't know.
Yeah. I think the market's as there. Well. Don't forget to specify color. We're gonna have the black, the green, and the red.
That's right.
Should we do a pink?
Yeah.
Should we do a pink for the women?
No, please don't confuse us any further. There's already so many things going on.
Yes, there has been many hours of discussions trying to figure this shit out. Do not confuse it more.
No, we do not need to use flaming red. Will not be an option.
What about
bleach in the fucking wash? It'll change it. It'll be pink.
No. Anyway, before Dave further derails this, Gavin, where can everyone find you on the internet?
The best place to find me is on the Instagrams, Urbex GTA, all one word. Or if you happen to be in the Toronto area, taking the class with our friends True North Tradecraft and Delta 2 Alpha on the weekend coming up. I'll be there too, in person, doing hood rat stuff with my friends.
Oh, you could probably stroke Gavin's beard for a price.
It's true.
You have to pay extra for that.
Yeah, I said for a price.
Yeah.
And remember, as his pimp, I get a cut.
$20 is $20, buddy.
It goes
Exactly.
We both get a cut. Ragnarok gets a cut.
There we go. Dave, where can everyone find you when you're not confusing the t-shirt issue?
You find me at on the grams at Diesel6223, and I will be at an NROI course this coming weekend to be an official range officer for IPSC, because
Ooh,
I like to shoot for free.
official.
Does that come with a cool jersey, or do you have to supply
I
your
hope
own?
so. I don't know. I really hope I don't have to supply my own.
No, I think you get an RO jersey, don't you?
I
They all
think
have
you
those
should
like gray, like
take a page
Yeah,
out of
great
Chris's book and make your own.
It's true.
yes,
I am
absolutely.
RO.
Go buy
That's right.
Sharpies.
I am the big fish. That's what it's gonna read across it. And then on to directly from there on Sunday, I got a 3.5-hour drive up to the hunt camp, and I will not be on next week's episode for sure. I will be out in the bush looking for Bambi.
I wish you great success in your hunting.
Thank
Yes,
you, sir.
make sure to make an offering to Uller in advance, and then upon your successful return, give him an offering.
It's a good idea.
I can't make you any worse.
That's right. It can't hurt.
Can't hurt. I want to remind everyone, if you're doing any sort of shopping for tactical supplies and first aid accessories or t-shirts, go to Ragnarok Tactical, use the discount code Patriot when you check out, save yourself a couple bucks. Shipped a couple of more things this week. That was good. It's only Monday, and I've been to the post office twice. Not mad about that. Almost forgot. I have to apologize to Rod Giltaka. Rod couldn't make it onto the show. He said he didn't want to do a review of an American book. We need to do a JTF 2 book, and then he will read it and participate.
That's fair. That's fair. He's got principles.
I thought that was great.
Yeah.
He asked me if he could drink maple syrup during the show, and I said that was acceptable.
If he wants the diabetes, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Free
So we
healthcare.
need to do a JTF 2 book, and he's going to do maple syrup shots.
And if he drinks it out of the bottle, it'll probably be a metal straw.
I'm fine with this. For all of our listeners out there in podcast land, I'd like to remind you that you are the true north, strong and free.